These are the English Language Proficiency Assessment Screener informational slides, which contain introductory information about the ELPA screener. These slides are suitable for people who are new to the ELPA screener or who would like to be refreshed on basic functions and policies related to the screener. To learn more about updates that are relevant to the coming school year, see the yearly ELPA Informational webinar.
My name is Ben Wolcott, and I serve as the English Language Proficiency Assessment Specialist on the assessment team at ODE. I will be guiding you through this audio version of the webinar. If you would rather proceed through the webinar at your own pace, exit the audio presentation at any time. The script for this presentation can be found in the Notes section of the slides. Please note that the links embedded in these slides are most easily clickable during presentation mode. The principal purpose of the ELPA screener is to confirm possible English learner status as defined by the U.S. Department of Education. The U.S. Department of Education specifies that a valid and reliable ELP screening instrument must measure student English proficiency in 4 domains. While the majority of students taking the screener tend to come from environments with high use of languages other than English, remember that under the federal definition of an English learner, Native American or Alaska Native students who indicate English as their primary home language can still be identified as English learners. The ELPA screener and ELPA summative differ in purpose and availability. Notably, the screener is intended to be a one-time event, which determines student entry into English language development services, while the summative is an annual expectation taken by all students who have not yet exited EL status. The screener is a fixed form, which means that at a given grade level, the test always presents the same items in the same order. The summative is semi-adaptive, which means that where possible, the test chooses which items to deliver and in which order based on student performance. The format, scoring, and appearance of the summative and screener are quite similar. It would be difficult for a casual observer to immediately differentiate between a screener administration and a summative administration. Note that all accommodations and supports available for summative testing are also available for the ELPA screener.
The Language Use Survey is a preliminary instrument that helps identify students who need screening because they may meet the federal definition of an English learner. There is one single statewide language use survey, which must be used unaltered. The notes for this slide include the full federal definition of an English learner, although I will not read it aloud in this presentation.
This and future reflection slides may be a good place to pause the presentation and think, or have a short discussion with someone who may be watching the presentation with you. What concerns should districts have with the quotations on this slide? Number 1, we do not screen based on last name, appearance, or suspected ethnic category. All of these, and factors like them, are potential civil rights violations. We screen solely on information directly concerning the student's experience with English. Number 2, we can get better and more relevant information from parents or guardians who will have a more in-depth knowledge of the student's history with language. Number 3, we should phrase our questions more in terms of how often, or in what situations, or when and under what conditions did the student learn this language. Parents don't automatically know what we mean when we say academic English. Now we will follow the screening process from beginning to end, starting with test administrator training and ending with score reporting and proficiency determination.
The materials listed on this slide form a baseline of required training materials. If special circumstances require ODE to add or modify training materials mid-year, test administrators and district test coordinators should review the new material, but they do not need to review all training materials from scratch. Test administrators who join a district mid-year need to complete training before administering the ELPA screener to students. If the district has an annual season for completing ODE required trainings, the newly arriving test administrator should renew their training at that time. Otherwise, their training is good for a full calendar year, although they will of course need to review any relevant updates over the course of that year. Further optional training materials are available on the ODE website, such as reporting system training slides, speaking scoring slides, and the ELPA informational webinar.
Both for test security and maximizing reliability of state data, districts should not create demo students for the purposes of allowing test administrators to explore the ELPA screener. Although ELPA 21 has not developed a dedicated training version of the screener, we can use the training materials available to us to assemble a screener-like experience for new test administrators. The existing sample test is a good starting point. This test was technically designed with the summative in mind, but due to the similarity in format between the screener and the summative, anyone who has seen the sample test knows what to expect for the reading, writing, and listening domains on the screener. The only feature of the screener not represented on the sample test are the TA-scored speaking items. To help test administrators build an understanding of how this part of the test will function, we recommend both the required training materials dealing with speaking scoring and also one or both sets of speaking scoring practice slides, linked here. The scoring practice slides are a great way to calibrate scoring and inter-rater reliability among your staff. Finally, note that each testing session begins with a series of practice items, which will serve a secondary purpose of reorienting the TA to the screener each time a new test is proctored. Just as with the summative, the screener must be administered in a secure, distraction-free, prepared environment. While the testing system is programmed to immediately implement accommodations and supports, such as domain exemptions, it is a good idea to put them in place ahead of time to avoid unwelcome surprises due to internet disruptions or user error. It may be useful for new test administrators to think through their first experience with the screener ahead of time. If multiple students are scheduled for screening, it may be useful to begin with students who appear to have the greatest initial English proficiency or the most experience with technology, so the TA can focus on screener administration rather than navigating a complicated interaction with the student. It's a good idea to view all materials before a first experience with the screener. You don't want to see anything for the first time on the day of administration. Some test administrators may find it useful to make a plan. Do you have any fears or worries? What resources or preparations can you put in place should your fears come to pass? Students may be screened using either their state-assigned SSID or a system-generated temporary ID. Each ID has a single screening opportunity. When possible, it is preferable to screen students using their SSID. However, sometimes screening must be completed before an SSID becomes available, for example, meeting federally required identification timelines. Temporary IDs exist to ensure that there will always be an ID available for any student who needs screening. Districts can perform a merge following screening to permanently associate a score with the student's SSID.
Temporary IDs may be created in advance through the Test Information Distribution Engine, or as needed through the testing interface. Temporary IDs are always created one at a time. Temporary IDs are not the same thing as a local or district-issued ID. All temporary IDs begin with the three-letter prefix ORT. In order to preserve information about a student's testing history, districts are encouraged, though not required, to later merge temporary IDs with students' permanent SSIDs. This can be performed using a batch process. The system uses a fuzzy matching algorithm to help find records where the student's name is close but not identical. However, a student's birth date must match exactly. It is preferable to minimize data entry errors when creating temporary IDs.
The following is a direct quote of relevant guidance from the ELPA Screener Administration Manual. A district may believe that a student slated for English language proficiency screening may qualify for services under a Section 504 or individualized education program. But typical documentation, such as a comprehensive evaluation report, may not be available to support such a determination. In such cases, if screening timelines preclude the convening of an effective 504 or IEP team, the test administrator may select any accommodations on the ELPA screener for which there is good evidence of student need, such as information provided by parents or caregivers, clearly observable evidence of a disability which impedes access to one or more domains, or relevant medical documentation. Districts who pursue this course of action must record and store evidence used to select accommodations, along with other screener documentation in the student's permanent file. Information on accommodations and accessibility supports is given in the Test Administration Manual and the Oregon Accessibility Manual, found on ODE's Test Administration page. End citation. There are also cases where a district may believe there are good reasons to delay screening for students with a suspected disability. Please contact Kim Miller for more details. TAs who are new to the ELPA screener may find it useful to summarize the procedures for creating a temporary ID and what counts as good evidence for implementation decisions based on the suspected presence of a disability. In addition, your district may have specific policies or procedures for selecting and recording evidence used to justify implementation of accommodations for a student who may have a disability. Student screening in grade K may see two different test forms on the test selection screen, grade K and grade future K. These forms are the same test, meaning they have the same items in the same order. However, the two forms apply different scoring rules, which I will outline later in this presentation.
During the months of March through July, grade K students may be able to see both forms available on their test selection screen. The TA should be ready to help them choose the correct form. Students who have not yet begun their kindergarten year always use the Future K form. Students who have begun their kindergarten year and who test prior to the opening of the grade K screener window also use the Future K form, even if they are already receiving instruction in a kindergarten classroom. Students who test during the grade K window of their kindergarten year use the grade K form. Districts should only need to make a choice about which form to select in the months of March through July, when late arriving kindergarten students test on the grade K form, and students who have not yet begun their kindergarten year test on the Future K form.
Now, let's move on to the test itself. The ELPA screener is divided into 3 steps. From the student's point of view, the division between these steps may not always be clear. However, it is useful for the TA to understand where the test transitions from one step to another and why they exist. Practice step 1 forms a sort of preview of the test. This helps the student become comfortable with test operation and allows the TA to determine the student's facility with testing technology, as well as the student's level of participation. Step 2 includes an initial set of scored items from all 4 domains. The beginning of this step includes TA scoring responsibilities. At the end of this step, the test performs a quick calculation to see if the student could possibly be proficient or if the test needs to end. Step 3 includes more items from all 4 domains. This step is administered only to students who could possibly score proficient. The TA has no scoring responsibilities during this step. Just as the name indicates, the items in practice step 1 are for practice purposes only. They help preview required interactions for the student, such as operating the record and playback functions for the speaking portion of the test. During this step, the TA will observe student interaction with the test. At the end of this step, the TA will indicate the student's participation level and whether the TA will be providing any technology assistance going forward. This screen will appear at the end of practice step 1. The TA answers these questions, not the student. Unsupervised students may choose an inappropriate answer, which could lead to a testing impropriety. Should the TA indicate that the student is a non-participant, they will see a follow-up question asking them to indicate their reason for the choice. The answer choices also include appropriate next steps, as well as what to do if the option was selected in error. Once again, responding to this screen is the TA's responsibility, not the student's. Any student who meaningfully interacts with the test is considered to be a participant. This slide contains a non-exhaustive list of examples illustrating participation and non-participation. The definition of meaningful interaction is fairly broad, and newcomers with no knowledge of English still count as participants, even if their response to the test is a series of variations on "I don't know" or "I don't understand." It is important to remember that the goal of the screener is to measure a student's English language proficiency, and responses such as "I don't know" are still supplying the test with important information about the student's level of proficiency. Some districts have reported that TAs see the word practice and incorrectly assume that they have accidentally logged into the sample test. It may be a good idea to clarify with TAs what they can expect to see upon entering the screener and how it differs from the sample test. Also, we've seen numerous reports from TAs which demonstrate inaccurate understandings of participation versus non-participation. Step 2 of the screener consists of scored items from all 4 domains. Practice Step 1 ended with a set of speaking items. Step 2 begins with speaking items so that the recording procedure is still fresh in the student's mind. After recording responses to this set of items, the student will surrender their computer to the TA, who will score the student responses. An unsupervised student may accidentally score their own speaking responses, thus leading to an inaccurate screener result and a testing impropriety. At the end of Step 2, the test calculates the student's performance thus far. If there is no chance that a student can score proficient, even if they complete all the remaining items on the screener, then the test stops here and the student receives a confirmation message that they have completed the test. If there is a chance the student could score proficient, the test proceeds to Step 3. The required speaking scoring training document includes sample student responses with associated score points. TAs may also wish to use one or both sets of speaking scoring slides to create a more realistic scoring scenario. These slides include an ELPA-like question with a range of student responses on one slide and suggested score points with rationales on a following slide. As stated before, students who may possibly be proficient advance to Step 3 of the screener and are administered additional items from all non-exempt domains. TAs have no scoring responsibilities during this step, but it does include human-scored items. Specifically, there are speaking constructed response items in all grades, and there are writing constructed response items in all grades 2 through 12, not K through 1. These human-scored items are scored off-site by our vendor. This chart summarizes the total expected testing time for the 25th through 75th percentile of students in Oregon. Note that the columns are independent, so the expected testing time for Step 2 plus 3 is a total and does not need to be added to the testing time in Step 2. The ELPA screener can be paused and resumed like Oregon's other tests. However, once a test opportunity has been opened, it must be completed within 14 calendar days. At the end of the 14th day, the test will be automatically submitted for scoring. The ELPA screener can be reopened and reset, like Oregon's other tests. In the case of an undesired auto-submit or other difficulty, it is better to request that the partially completed test be reopened rather than opening a new test. Such requests are made by the district testing coordinator using ODE's testing impropriety form. Now let's talk about scoring and proficiency. Like the summative, the screener yields results in all non-exempt domains. This domain profile is then consulted to generate an overall proficiency level. In grades K through 12, a student must score 4 or higher on all non-exempt domains in order to score proficient. While some data systems require overall proficiency designations to be expressed numerically, the individual domain scores form a more accurate picture of the student's English proficiency and are more useful for instruction and placement decisions. Note that the progressing category in particular is quite wide. Non-participating students qualify for EL services and should be reported in relevant data collections as having scored 1 in all non-exempt domains.
The Future K screener is scored differently from grades K through 12. A student testing on the Future K form is proficient if they score a 3 or higher in all non-exempt domains. All other grades require a 4 or higher in non-exempt domains for a proficient result.
The individual score reports for the ELPA screener and summative are nearly identical. The summative version includes a numeric scale score with the domain proficiency level, while the screener ISR does not. Summative scores are retrieved from dedicated ODE applications, such as secure assessment reports. Screener results are retrieved from the centralized reporting system. Scores for steps 1 and 2, which require no off-site scoring, should arrive the same day. Step 3, which requires hand scoring through an off-site vendor, should arrive within 7 calendar days maximum. As we finish the presentation, a few important reminders. It's important to remember that opt-out provisions are a legislatively defined concept that apply exclusively to the math and English language arts tests. There is no federal provision for exemption from English language proficiency testing, although Oregon does have an administrative rule that permits parent-requested exemptions from state-mandated learning activities for religious or disability reasons. You can find more information on parent-requested exemptions in the test administration manual. The Braille screener is ordered using the same form as the Braille summative. There is no ordering deadline for the Braille screener. This slide contains links to potentially useful resources.